When frequency is right, reality doesn't negotiate. It doesn't delay. It doesn't test. It responds. The problem is that most people don't realize how rarely their frequency is actually stable. They experience moments of alignment and assume that's enough. They touch coherence briefly, then fall back into familiar internal noise and wonder why nothing moves. Frequency is not a mood. It's not an emotion. And it's not something you raise in moments of inspiration. Frequency is the state your system returns to when nothing is trying to impress you, when there's no outcome in front of you, when no one is watching. That state is what reality obeys. This is uncomfortable because it removes fantasy from manifestation. It strips away the idea that you can override your internal baseline with intention alone. Reality does not respond to what you activate temporarily. It responds to what you sustain unconsciously. From a quantum perspective, this makes perfect sense. The field collapses probability around the most coherent signal available, not the loudest one, not the most hopeful one, the most coherent one. Coherence means internal agreement, thought, emotion, body, and expectation no longer pulling in different directions. When that agreement exists, response feels instant. Not dramatic, not magical, just immediate. Like gravity working without asking for permission. The reason this feels rare is because coherence is fragile in a system trained on urgency. Most nervous systems are conditioned to oscillate. They spike with motivation, then crash into doubt. They feel aligned when things move, then contract when they don't. That fluctuation creates noise, and noise slows collapse. Neuroscience explains why this happens automatically. The nervous system is not designed to chase outcomes. It is designed to predict safety. When the future feels uncertain, the body tightens, breath shortens, muscles brace, attention narrows. In that state, even positive desire is interpreted as risk, because it represents change. That subtle tightening is enough to disrupt frequency. This is why people say things like, "It works when I stop thinking about it." What they're actually describing is a moment when the nervous system stopped interfering. Pressure dropped, control dissolved, the signal stabilized, reality responded. Not because they did something new, but because they stopped doing something unnecessary. Frequency becomes right when there is nothing inside you resisting the arrival of the outcome. No bracing, no rehearsing disappointment, no scanning for signs, just a quiet internal posture that says, nothing here needs to be protected. That posture is rare because it feels vulnerable. It requires trust at the body level, not the intellectual one. And most people confuse trust with passivity. In reality, trust is a regulated state of readiness. The system is open, alert, and not defensive. This is where magic appears to happen. But it isn't magic. It's precision. The field responds instantly when the observer stops sending mixed signals, when desire is present without urgency, when expectation exists without pressure, when attention is focused without attachment. That combination collapses probability cleanly. Most people never stay in this state long enough to notice its effect. The moment coherence appears, the mind rushes in to evaluate it. Is this working? Should I do more? What if I lose this feeling? Those questions tighten the system again. The frequency drops, response slows, and the loop restarts. This is why manifestation feels inconsistent for so many. Not because they lack power, but because they don't yet recognize the internal moment when power is actually active. When frequency is right, reality doesn't need motivation. It doesn't need belief. It doesn't need repetition. It responds because there is nothing inside you delaying it. And the real question becomes clear. How do you remain in that state without trying to hold it? Because the moment you try to hold it, you destabilize it. That paradox is where everything changes. When frequency is right, effort becomes unnecessary, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. In fact, this is when the most important work is taking place beneath awareness. What changes is not your intention, but your internal environment. The system stops fighting itself, and when that internal conflict dissolves, reality no longer receives contradictory instructions. Most people don't realize how often they sabotage alignment without noticing. not through doubt, but through micro-tension, a subtle rush, a need to check, a reflex to control timing. These movements seem insignificant, yet they continuously pull the nervous system back into prediction mode. And prediction mode anchors reality to the past. From a neurological standpoint, prediction is the brain's default survival function. The brain is always asking, what happened before, and how do I prepare for it again? If your past included instability, delay, or disappointment, the nervous system assumes those patterns are safer to repeat than unknown outcomes. Not because they're pleasant, but because they're familiar. This is why frequency doesn't stabilize through thinking. Thinking happens too late. The body has already reacted. The signal has already been sent. From a quantum perspective, this explains why manifestation feels slow when you're monitoring it. Monitoring collapses attention inward, not outward. It creates self-reference, and self-reference introduces noise. The observer becomes emotionally entangled with the outcome instead of remaining present with probability. Reality does not respond cleanly to an entangled observer. When frequency is right, attention is outward, not self-focused. You are engaged, but not watching yourself engage. You are present, but not checking whether presence is working. That absence of self-monitoring is what allows coherence to hold. Neuroscience calls this state flow. But flow is not just productivity, it's regulation. The nervous system is active without being defensive. The parasympathetic and sympathetic systems are balanced. Energy moves without urgency. And when the system is balanced, perception widens. Widened perception is crucial. It allows you to notice opportunities without scanning, to respond intuitively without rehearsing, to act without second-guessing. Each of these behaviors reinforces frequency because they confirm safety at the body level. Over time, this creates a powerful feedback loop. Regulation leads to aligned action. Aligned action leads to confirmation. Confirmation strengthens regulation. And reality reorganizes around that loop effortlessly. This is why manifestation often feels like things just falling into place. They didn't fall randomly. They aligned around a stable signal that no longer required correction. Most people never experience this consistently because they interrupt it too soon. The moment things begin to move, excitement spikes. Excitement tightens the system. The nervous system interprets intensity as instability. Frequency wavers. Response slows. Calm, not excitement, sustains alignment. This is counterintuitive in a culture that equates intensity with power. But biologically, intensity signals volatility. The nervous system prefers steadiness, and the quantum field mirrors steadiness with speed. When frequency is right, you don't need to raise your vibration. That phrase itself implies effort and hierarchy. Frequency is not raised, it's cleared. Cleared of urgency, cleared of self-surveillance, cleared of the belief that something must happen soon for you to be safe. Safety is the real magnet. Once safety becomes internal, the subconscious stops clinging to old timelines. It releases outdated predictions. It allows new probabilities to register. And because there is no internal resistance, collapse feels immediate. This is also why silence becomes important at this stage. Silence is not emptiness, it's integration. It's the nervous system recalibrating without stimulation. In silence, frequency settles, and once settled, it holds. People often rush to fill silence because it feels unfamiliar. They mistake stillness for loss of momentum. In reality, stillness is where momentum consolidates. The field does not respond to motion alone. It responds to direction without friction. And friction is internal. When frequency is right, there is no friction. Desire moves without resistance. Action feels obvious instead of forced. And reality mirrors that ease precisely. This is why instant manifestation feels anticlimactic. There is no emotional spike, no dramatic payoff, just alignment completing itself. And the moment you realize this, another question emerges. If coherence creates instant response, what keeps pulling you out of it when nothing is wrong? Because that answer determines whether frequency becomes a moment, or a way of being. When frequency is right, action stops feeling strategic and starts feeling inevitable. This is one of the clearest signs that alignment has moved from concept into physiology. You're no longer asking, "What should I do?" You're responding. And response is fundamentally different from effort. Effort comes from anticipation. Response comes from presence. Most people live in anticipation without realizing it. They anticipate outcomes, reactions, delays, problems. Anticipation pulls attention into the future and forces the nervous system to prepare. Preparation activates tension. Tension fragments frequency. And fragmented frequency creates lag. From a neurological perspective, anticipation is a mild form of stress. Even positive anticipation triggers microactivation in the nervous system. The body prepares for something that hasn't happened yet. Muscles tighten, breath shortens. The brain begins simulating scenarios. All of this happens below conscious awareness. This is why frequency drops even when you're excited about the future. Excitement is still projection. Projection is still distance. And distance is what slows response. When frequency is right, attention collapses back into the present moment without force. Not because you practiced mindfulness, but because there's no internal reason to leave the present. The nervous system is not scanning. The brain is not predicting. The body is not bracing. Presence is not a spiritual achievement. It is a regulated physiological state. From a quantum perspective, this matters because probability collapses only in the present. The observer cannot collapse a future they are not fully present to receive. When attention is scattered across imagined timelines, coherence breaks. The signal becomes diffuse. Reality responds weakly or slowly. This explains why aligned action feels obvious. There is no internal debate, no overthinking, no emotional negotiation. The system recognizes what fits the current frequency and moves accordingly. Action emerges as a byproduct of coherence, not a tool to create it. This is also why people often say, "I don't know why I did that, it just felt right." What they're describing is frequency-guided behavior. The nervous system sensed coherence and allowed action without interference. Neuroscience confirms this. When the nervous system is regulated, the prefrontal cortex operates without overload. Decision-making becomes efficient. Pattern recognition improves. You stop considering options that don't match your state. This creates the illusion that reality is narrowing choices for you. In truth, you are narrowing them by frequency. When frequency is unstable, you consider everything. When frequency is stable, only aligned options register. The rest don't even feel available. This is where manifestation begins to feel instant. Not because things appear out of nowhere, but because misaligned timelines stop competing for attention. The field reflects clarity by reducing friction. Most people try to create this clarity by thinking harder. That backfires. Thinking introduces delay because it reactivates prediction. Prediction pulls from the past. The past is incompatible with a new frequency. This is why silence becomes critical at this stage. Silence is not absence of thought. It's absence of interference. In silence, the nervous system recalibrates without being interrupted by mental simulation. Many people become uncomfortable here. Silence feels exposed. It feels like something is missing. That discomfort is not a problem. It is withdrawal from urgency. The system is learning a new baseline. If you fill that silence with effort, you reset the old pattern. If you allow it, frequency stabilizes. This is the threshold where most people turn back, not because they fail, but because the new state feels unfamiliar. The identity built around striving doesn't know how to exist without friction. It mistakes ease for danger. But ease is not collapse. Ease is alignment without resistance. From a quantum standpoint, this is when the observer becomes non-invasive. You are no longer manipulating probability emotionally. You are simply present with it. And presence collapses outcomes cleanly. This is why reality seems to obey at this stage, not because you command it, but because nothing inside you contradicts it. Desire is clean, expectation is neutral, attention is stable. When frequency is right, there is no waiting energy. Waiting implies distance. Distance implies lack. Lack destabilizes frequency. Instead, there is readiness. Readiness does not rush. It remains available. Availability is the most powerful signal you can send. It tells the field, nothing here is resisting arrival. And when nothing resists arrival, response does not need to travel through time. It simply appears. The question now is no longer how to create this state, but how not to disturb it. Because once you recognize how subtle coherence is, you realize it's not maintained by doing more, but by interfering less. And that realization changes everything. When frequency is right, daily life becomes the real test. Not the big moments, not the intentions, the ordinary moments. Because frequency does not collapse reality in meditation. It collapses reality in how you live when nothing important seems to be happening. This is where most people unknowingly lose alignment. They feel coherent during reflection, then destabilized during routine, a rushed morning, a reactive conversation, a decision made from habit instead of presence. None of these feel significant, yet each one subtly resets the nervous system to an older baseline. From a neurological standpoint, this happens because habits are stored in the body, not the mind. The nervous system prefers efficiency over evolution. It will default to familiar responses unless something interrupts the pattern. And frequency is nothing more than the sum of those responses over time. This is why alignment cannot be something you turn on. It must be something you live from. Otherwise, the signal remains intermittent, and intermittent signals produce intermittent results. When frequency is right, you begin to notice how often you used to tighten unnecessarily, how often you rushed without need, how often you spoke to fill space, how often you anticipated problems that never arrived. These patterns don't disappear instantly, but now they're visible. Visibility changes everything. Once a pattern is seen, it can no longer run unconsciously. And unconscious patterns are the only ones that have power over frequency. Conscious patterns dissolve quickly because the nervous system no longer mistakes them for safety. From a quantum perspective, this is critical. The field responds to what is consistent, not what is intense. One reactive moment doesn't collapse alignment. Repetition does. And repetition is broken not by force but by awareness. This is where living from frequency becomes practical. You begin to pause before responding, not dramatically, subtly. You notice the impulse to rush, and don't follow it. You feel the urge to control timing, and let it pass. These micro-choices seem small, but they recalibrate the nervous system faster than any technique. Neuroscience confirms this. Each time you interrupt an automatic stress response and remain regulated, the brain updates its model of safety. It learns that the present moment does not require defense. Over time, these moments accumulate into a new baseline, and once the baseline shifts, frequency holds naturally. This is why alignment feels easier over time instead of harder. You're not holding it, you're returning to it. The nervous system begins to recognize coherence as home. Spiritually, this is what living in alignment actually means. Not maintaining a feeling, but maintaining an internal posture. A posture of openness, of non-resistance, of grounded availability. When this posture is present, decisions change. You stop choosing based on fear of loss. You stop overcommitting to prove worth. You stop delaying action to avoid discomfort. Action becomes clean, simple, undramatic. This is when reality begins to respond consistently instead of sporadically. Consistency is what makes response feel instant. Not because things happen immediately, but because nothing inside you is pulling away once they start. You don't hesitate. You don't second guess. You don't tighten after the fact. The system stays open. Most people miss this phase because it feels too normal. They expect manifestation to feel magical. In truth, it feels grounded, stable, almost boring to the identity that thrived on emotional swings. But that boredom is actually freedom. It means the nervous system no longer needs stimulation to stay engaged. It no longer mistakes chaos for aliveness. From a quantum standpoint, this is the ideal observer state. Present without attachment, engaged without interference, clear without urgency. In this state, probability collapses smoothly because the observer is not distorting it. This is why aligned people often say, "I didn't do anything special." They're right. They didn't add anything. They removed interference, and interference is always internal. As frequency stabilizes, time perception changes. Waiting feels different. Silence feels neutral instead of threatening. Delays feel informative instead of frustrating. These shifts signal that the nervous system is no longer anchored to old timelines. Reality reflects this immediately, not through dramatic events, but through subtle efficiency. Conversations happen faster. Opportunities surface with less friction. Decisions resolve themselves without struggle. You move with life instead of against it. This is what it means to live from the right frequency, not perfection, not constant calm, but rapid return to coherence. And once return becomes automatic, reality no longer needs to slow down to match you. It meets you where you are. When frequency is right, pressure no longer destabilizes you. It reveals you. This is the phase where alignment is tested not by silence,